pledged to fight for my king.
You know nothing of war.
I'm the fastest rider you have.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bomb Squad Matinee. I am your host for this evening, Tim M. Sullivan, and with me I have...
I'm T. Richard Kraft, and I'm yawning. Sorry.
Many such cases. And with us, we are joined by a special guest returning from the Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania episode. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Emilia, and I'm here to talk about anime. I love talking about anime.
Amelia Earhart?
No, that's with an A. Not me, sadly. I would love to have been eaten by crabs in
that can be arranged
in the Pacific.
I can make a couple calls.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
And we're talking about anime today. Specifically, we are talking about The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. This is a film directed by Kenji Kamiyama, who is probably best known for directing the Ghost in the Shell standalone complex TV series. He's done a lot of series directing work. He also directed the film Jinro the Wolf Brigade. Good picture, a lot of killing.
I do love that killing, sir.
I do love that kill. It is also produced by Jason DeMarco from Adult Swim and Toonami. So with that pedigree going into it, I was looking forward to this. I was interested. So let's just get right into our opening question, which is, what were your expectations going into this picture? Tanner, we'll start with you.
So, obviously, I think it's pretty clear that this is an intersection of my interests, the same way that a black bean burger and another black bean burger are intersections of my interests, which is to say I don't hate it. It's fine. It's edible, but I'm not exactly super fans of the things. I like Lord of the Rings. I love the first 3 Lord of the Rings movies. I'm not really a big Lord of the Rings head, though. I haven't read any of the books other than The Hobbit. And The Hobbit is a good book. I like The Hobbit a lot. But I never got into the books. I haven't really watched any of the expanded media. Really, my only Lord of the Rings things is I watched the Lord of the Rings movies and I've seen the Hobbit movies. That's largely the extent of it. And obviously, I like anime fine. I'm a big Miyazaki guy. Another director, like on my all-time favorite movies list, the guy that did The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, his name's escaping me right now. Is like on there. 2 of his films are on my all-time favorite movies list, so I like anime fine, but I'm not like an anime super fan. But, I thought this looked, to be frank, fine, okay even. I didn't have particularly high expectations going into this. To be perfectly frank, part of the reason I watched this is, 1, I try to catch every movie I can in theaters, and 2, it didn't seem there was a ton of interest in the podcast group chat for this episode, and I didn't want to leave poor Tim out to dry. I was going into this thinking, it'll probably be a fine enough movie. I won't regret seeing it. There'll probably be some cool action stuff or something, and there'll be a lord, perhaps a ring, maybe even a war for the Rohirrim, Rohan, Rwanda, whatever. One of those words. So, I just had very muted expectations going in. It wasn't exactly super high up on my radar, but I did make sure I saw it in theaters as soon as I could, because when I saw these box office returns, I was like, oh, I have like a week to see this, because they're gonna pull this shit so hard, because it was bombing. But yeah, what did I think of the movie? Keep watching, bucko, and maybe you'll be lucky to find out. Back to you, Tim.
Fair enough. Emilia, what were your expectations going in?
Yeah, so I in particular was cautious of this movie going into it, because a lot of the anime adaptations of Western IPs that have happened have not been great. I know I'm not really a big fan, in particular, of the Rick and Morty anime adaptation, which was also done by this studio, Sola Digital Arts, who worked with Warner Brothers primarily on this film. But I was hopeful because I too am a fan of Kenji Kamiyama as a director. I really liked Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, and he directed one of my favorite Star Wars Vision shorts, the one called The Ninth Jedi, in season 1, which I felt people were pretty harsh on, but they didn't need to be, because again, none of those are canon.
Yeah.
I say again, but I hadn't brought that up. And because they're not canon, I think it left a lot of room for more creative decisions that he got to put into it with his team for that. And in this, I was hoping to see a lot more of that. That was my expectation, was to see some new perspective on the Lord of the Rings material that we've come to know and love from Peter Jackson's adaptation of Tolkien's work, and give it a new spin with the stuff the medium can bring, the animation can only do for film, because there's less limitation than if you were to do everything with practical effects or even CGI that you can do with true animation. And I was very excited to see what they did, but my expectations were pretty low, considering that it was a Western IP just kind of getting an anime adaptation of a part of it that wasn't even relevant to the main story.
All right. I do want to touch on something you mentioned, the Rick and Morty. So like I try to keep up with like the Toonami releases, and
Right.
I am more positive on them than most people for the most part. But like I tried watching an episode of that Rick and Morty anime, and I got like to the opening credits when a voice in my head said, "You have limited time on this earth. Do you really want to spend any amount of that time on this show?" And I just turned it off.
Absolutely.
But yeah, going into expectations for this, I was hopeful that it would be good. I was looking forward to it. Like I said, big fan of Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, so knowing that Kenji Kamiyama was going to be directing it, that was intriguing to me. And like I said, big fan of Adult Swim and Toonami, so knowing Jason DeMarco was going to be producing it was interesting to me. And, you know, I do kind of agree with your point, Emilia, that like a lot of the sort of Western IP anime collaborations, there have been some decent ones. Like I enjoyed the Blade Runner Black Lotus series personally. Like it's less traditional anime than it is just like, you know, a Japanese CGI cartoon, but I had fun with that. I thought it was interesting. But, you know, some of them are just kind of, you know, take them or leave them. But I was hoping this one would be good. Coming off of the burn of Uzumaki, I was ready to get hurt again. But I was hoping this one would be good. And my fiance is a huge Lord of the Rings fan. So we were both pretty excited to see it, but what did we think of it? We'll get into that later. But first, we're going to hear what you guys thought of it.
By my life, Rohan still stands! Helm, hammer hand, still stands!
So what were your thoughts on Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim? Tanner, take us off.
You want me to take you off? No. So I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. Did I really understand any of the deeper lore implications? No. Again, I haven't read any of the fucking books other than The Hobbit. But you know, I had fun with it. It was a pretty solid story of classic portrayal of this. For me, it was mostly just a standard bog standard fantasy story. You know, castles under siege. And then at one point, an old man seemingly grows to be 8 feet tall, has a 12-pack, and start beating up monsters with his bare hands in the winter. And I go, oh yeah, this is an anime. The action sequences are generally appealing. I liked them. I thought the plot was pretty solid. I liked the main character. I appreciated how much, well, maybe appreciate isn't the right word, but I enjoyed the story. I also enjoyed her character arc of, I guess, finally just truly having a voice for herself and for her people. Mm-hmm. While it seemed like for the most part, she only saw herself as a conduit for her people. And then by the end of the movie, I think she also saw herself as a conduit for herself. To be perfectly frank, don't have too much to say other than it was good. I liked it. The animation was solid, even though it was kind of funny every time I could tell something was done with CGI instead of the traditional hand-drawn animation, or I don't know if it was hand-drawn, whatever. Clearly different animation processes were achieved to make this movie, which made some of the 3D stuff kind of funny looking at points. But, you know, generally fine. Some of the behind the scenes stuff is really interesting. I was looking into that earlier today. Apparently they shot the entire movie with motion capture.
Yeah, they did Unreal Engine 3D capturing.
Yeah. And they did that in order to determine how they wanted the camera to move and what angles they wanted it at, which reminds me of, this is going to be an insane poll. Do you guys remember the 2006 movie Surf's Up?
Yes.
Because Surf's Up did a pretty similar thing where they used a virtual camera and real life actors in order to determine how they wanted the movie to look. That's why Surf's Up has like a lot of really natural looking camera shake, because they actually shot shit on cameras and they used that for reference and often imported that data into the movie. I always find stuff like that fascinating. Like, say what you will about the 2019 Lion King movie, it's fucking horrible, but a lot of the behind the scenes production stuff about it is fascinating. And honestly, I like the movie, but I do think it is somewhat telling that I'm more interested in talking about how they made the movie than I am in talking about the movie. You know what I mean? It's fine enough. I liked it. There was some cool stuff done in order to make it. I look forward to seeing this type of technology be used more for filmmaking in the future. It's solid, maybe a little long. And if I were to make one complaint, and I'm sure we'll probably all touch on this, the moments where all of a sudden they grabbed me by the collar and started hitting me with a hammer labeled "Remember Lord of the Rings," those sequences were kind of really funny. But I'm sure we'll get more into that later. Overall, solid flick. How they made it is infinitely more fascinating. Back to you, Tim.
Fair enough. Good stuff. All right, Emilia, thoughts on the film?
Yeah, so I have actually a point to make about what Tanner was saying concerning the animation and talking about the film being made more than it is necessarily the film itself. I think that when you're looking at an animated feature like this, especially one so long and so strained in budget and multiple studios working on it, talking about how the film is made is almost just as, if not more important, to discussing the quality of the film than it is typically for one where, you know, it's shot by camera and there's no secondary team of people making the visuals. I think that adds something to the understanding of analysis for the film's quality, right? Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, it was captured in Unreal Engine and for 3D capturing of the acted out scenes with the actors, and then they used that as a reference for the 2D animation. They did hand draw it from that. They didn't rotoscope the 3D, which was a specific directorial decision from Kamiyama, which I think was a good call. It added a lot of fluidity to the action sequences, and you can tell that when you're watching the film. It kind of maintains the same quality of action sequence that the original Lord of the Rings trilogy had as well. That I think is super important when you're making a prequel to that franchise. It is a huge portion of the Lord of the Rings that it is about a war like that on that giant scale. And when you're making a prequel that's also called The War of the Rohirrim, having those battles look realistic in the same way that you did with the live action series is very impressive, and it's very important, I think, for the quality of the film. However, I agree, the CGI for the environments was particularly jarring in comparison to the actual like hand-drawn characters. When the film opens up and then they switch from the map overview to the mountains that are CGI, and then you suddenly have the 2D animation of Hera, the main character. She's, about to call down a great eagle with a whatever chunk of meat she had. It almost took me out of the immersion of the film immediately, and it did not improve very much throughout my time watching it. And I think what did help me was that a lot of the interiors were hand drawn, and a lot of the buildings were hand drawn, even if they were out from the outside perspective. Especially the ones that they brought on specific people from the Peter Jackson trilogy to direct the art direction for the environments. Richard Taylor, Alan Lee, and John Howe. They worked on the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings trilogy, and they wanted to make sure that visual style was transferred properly into the anime. And I think that was successful. My thoughts on the film in particular, I think the writing was decent. It was certainly not what I expected for something that is Tolkien. I think it was a little bit too generic, but I did like that they wanted to explore a character that Tolkien didn't really do that much with in the notes that he had concerning the records of what inspired this film. They used the unnamed character as the main character and gave her a name. And I think that was pretty cool, because it allowed them to have a lot more freedom in writing the story for this, while still maintaining the lore of the Tolkien universe. I think overall, my impression of the film was that it wasn't trying to be anything special. It was just trying to be a Lord of the Rings cash grab, and that's okay in its own way, because at this point, when you're making not the second set of prequels, right? Like they had the Hobbit films, all three of them, and now this as a prequel, and also they had the Rings of Power TV show. You're getting to the point in a franchise's life where everything feels like that anyway. They might as well embrace it. And I didn't have a problem with it being a very safe, well-written, to an extent, fantasy story. I think what I was hoping for was a little bit more care from Warner Brothers about one of their biggest IPs. And maybe a little bit more involvement from the Tolkienists on writing the story. But overall, I wasn't disappointed with the film. My only gripe with it, and I think Tanner touched on it as well enough that I don't really need to go too deep into it, was the reminders that it was a franchise consistently. It didn't need that. It could have stood on its own legs after the introduction and been just fine. And I think I think it did what it needed to do, even if it took out all of those pieces. But that's my thoughts on it. I'll give it back to you, Tim.
All right, good stuff. Yeah, I guess going off of what you guys said and the general reviews I've seen online, it definitely seems like a movie where your mileage kind of varies. Like, I've seen some people who are big into Lord of the Rings and Tolkien who loved this movie, or who were big Tolkien fans who weren't so hot on it. To me, it seems like the kind of movie that is perfect for somebody who is a big fan of fantasy anime who kind of likes The Lord of the Rings. So I dug it. I thought it was a solid movie. Kind of echoing what you guys have said. The script is serviceable. It's not the best written thing in the world, but it's still an overall good time. I enjoyed all of the characters. I do love Wolf as a villain. He's just such a shitty little man. It's very entertaining watching him just get worse and worse throughout the movie. His character design is kind of like a generic, almost like Belmonte kind of design. So I can definitely get some criticisms there. But I still enjoyed him as a villain. Hera, I thought, was a really fun protagonist. Helm Hammerhand, played by Brian Cox, is definitely the show stealer of the movie for me. Just a great performance from him, and then just anytime he's on the screen, it's just absolute blast. Like, it's very fun kind of myth making, I think. Particularly his sort of like triumphant last stand where he just solos a bunch of fucking dudes and dies in the ice with a smile on his face and the hammer in his hand. That shit's just cool to me. I overall pretty much agree with what you guys have said. I will touch on the sort of reminders that it's a franchise thing. I mostly wasn't bothered by that. Like the only one that felt really gratuitous to me was the Christopher Lee one. That one was just dumb. That didn't need to be there. And watching it again today, that line read from him, I'm like, was this pulled from a video game? This is such a flat line read.
Yeah, so what they did was they pulled recorded audio from previous things he'd done in the role.
I believe the specific audio they used was from one of the Hobbit movies.
Gotcha.
Like an outtake from one of the Hobbit movies, I think.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. It definitely felt very like NPC line read. But yeah, that bit didn't need to be there, but I was more or less fine with the other like callbacks to the franchise. Like I didn't mind the goblins getting the rings. I didn't mind the Gandalf mention. I kind of dug the Helm's Deep name drop. I thought it went hard.
Our people do not call this keep the Hornburg anymore. They have named it for its true king. Helm's Deep.
Beyond that, though, I think it does stand alone pretty decently as, just a fantasy movie that happens to be in this world. So it worked for me. It's not going to work for everybody, but I think it's overall pretty decent time. And we're going to take a quick ad break right now. We'll be back with some more general discussion. Welcome back from that ad break. Time for another ad. MoviePalette.com. It's a website that has little art pieces that have thin lines representing the dominant colors of each frame of a movie. Got one up there for the film Mandy. Tanner's got one behind him for the film Punch Drunk Love. You might be able to get one for Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. I can probably get one for any of the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies. Hopefully it's from the original HD transfer and not the 4K shit that got desaturated to look like the Hobbit movies. But you can get any of those. You might be able to get the fucking Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings one. You can get any movie palette you want, even if they don't have it. You can pay a little extra, get one custom made. So you can get the Rankin Bass Return of the King movie palette for your home. Just go to moviepalette.com and enter the code SQUAD15 to save 15% on your order. Now, back to the show. Let's get into some general discussion. Let's generally discuss this picture.
So, you brought up the Christopher Lee thing, and I just want to point out that on Jump Cuts, our movie news shows that bi-weekly every other weekend, we'll stream it live on Twitch. We talked about the Christopher Lee thing when it broke out. You mostly went, I don't really care. Well, I was kind of like, this is kind of lame. Point being, we talked about it for maybe 5 minutes, which is about 100+ times longer than he actually is in the movie.
Yeah, he has a single line. It is very much...
It's so pointless.
It is very much the most, hey, look, here's that guy you know from the other movies. And
I think that it could have just not had him speak, and it would have been just as fine to use his image. I don't know why they were so set.
It would have been less upsetting, I think, because at least like coming like I'm of multiple. I talked about this on the Jump Cuts thing. I'm of multiple minds about this. I think if you have permission of the estate and it's just truly just archival stuff, that's ethical. That's fine. It's not like a CGI or a Gen AI thing.
Yeah.
But also, my stance of this is generally, why not cast a sound alike? Why not just let a new actor do their own take on the part? Knowing it's one fucking line that's maybe 7 words long, whatever. But also, what the fuck is this adding?
Yeah, if they wanted to like make Saruman a bigger character in the movie, they could have easily probably just gotten the guy who voices Count Dooku in the Clone Wars show.
Who does a great job.
He does a great
Christopher
wonderful
Lee
voice.
Yeah.
So like if they wanted to do something where he was a bigger character, they could have easily just had him fill in the role, and he would have done great.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that one scene is like the one thing that actually like bugs me in the movie. Like I don't mind the Gandalf mention, and hell, if they had done a Gandalf cameo with Ian McKellen, that might have been cool. Would have been more fitting.
Would have been more fitting, but I will also say that like the 3 moments that kind of really pulled me out of it was the Christopher Lee thing, the moment earlier in the movie where all of a sudden there's just fucking orcs here, and they're like, we gotta collect these rings. Why are we collecting these rings again? We gotta collect these rings, man. And I just remember thinking, yep, this is Lord of the Rings. Thank you for reminding me. And then right after the Christopher Lee thing, when someone's like, yeah, this wizard wrote me a letter, and I'm like, it's Gandalf. Oh, who's this wizard? Awkwardly long pause. His name is Gandalf. Well, yeah. It wasn't so much bringing up Gandalf, it's just that like they really milked out saying his fucking name for some reason.
It's different when it feels natural. And I think that a lot of it just felt very forced when they were referencing franchise stuff, like the Helm's Deep drop that you mentioned.
I like
that was great. That was great because it was natural. It made sense for the story. It wasn't pulling you out of it, and it was something that like felt like it belonged in the discussion that was being had at the moment. Whereas like bringing up, oh, hey, this wizard just reached out to me and wants to hear about the orcs that I just happened to overhear is like, wow, that's so contrived.
Yeah. But also her being like, this wizard reached out to me. The way you said it just now made me think it should have just been an email. This big old meeting should have been an email. Now, what about these wizards? Hold on, I'll send you an email. I'll send you an email about it.
Right.
Eagle mail.
There we go. Hell yeah, Eagle mail. But yeah, it was really only those 3 things, was the Gandalf, Christopher Lee, and the orcs in the middle. Because again, it was just like, for the most part, there weren't any orcs. So then suddenly orcs are collecting rings. And I just kind of went, what are we doing here, man?
I want to bring up a couple of really positive things that the film did.
No, of course. I liked the movie, for the record. I know it sounds like I didn't. I liked it.
No. I think we all agree that it was a pretty good film overall. It was satisfying to watch. It wasn't a negative experience by any means. But I want to point out some very specific highly positive things. I
Mhm.
loved the animation of the horses.
Yeah.
That is a very difficult animal to animate, and
Yeah.
obviously that team doesn't do as many horses as they had to do for the film. Usually, it's not a typical
Yeah.
thing that they're going to be animating, and they did a wonderful job.
Yeah.
All of them looked like real horses. All of them moved like real horses,
Mhm.
and there was a real beauty in the scene where Hera's brother, the younger of the
Yes.
two, is riding on his older horse, and you could just see the detail of it being an older horse in the way that they animated it, its movement, and it's such a touching scene, and it's successful
Yeah.
because of that high quality animation.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think the film did very, very well was they were great at casting.
Mhm.
Every single member of the main cast did a phenomenal job.
Mhm.
Gaia Wise was a great choice for Hera. She delivers very well, and although she doesn't have this huge filmography to back up on, to be like, hey, this is why she's a good choice, she proves it with this, and I hope that this helps launch her into further roles in animation. Brian Cox, who you mentioned being the show stealer, there's a reason he was chosen, and it's because he did Titus Andronicus in 1987, and his delivery of that role specifically led to him being chosen for Helm, and I think that was great. Great casting as well, and I was very pleased with the performance of Luke Pasqualino as Wolf. I think that he almost prevents Brian Cox from taking all of the attention away whenever he's on screen. You said that he was a good villain. I think what makes him a compelling antagonist for this film is just how believable he is when he's saying these really batshit things and completely ignoring any advice given to him just because of his emotions. It's so compelling to see.
I'm glad you brought up the villain, because I wanted to bring this up in my general review. But when I was thinking back on the movie after watching it, I remember just sitting in my chair, and all of a sudden I chuckled because all this realization in my mind hit when I went, "Oh my fucking god, the villain's an incel."
A little bit, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
When that realization hit me, I remember chuckling because I was like, they made an incel villain. That's funny.
Yeah,
it's funny, 100%. But it's also accurate.
Yeah, for sure. And I do love the way that they play him, and his advisor just every time just going, dude, don't do that, and then he does the thing every single time. It's great.
It's fairly funny watching his advisor progressively just get more fucking fed up as the movie goes on.
Right.
Like near the end, he's just like, "What the fuck are you?"
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
You kind of feel bad for him. I hate to say it. You
I
kind
feel
of
like
feel bad for him.
He stayed there out of loyalty for Wolf's father.
Yeah.
And that was his wrong choice.
Yeah.
And he had to live with those consequences until it was no longer livable.
Yeah. It is very funny, right towards the end of the climax, when Wolf says, ever since I met you, I knew you would be my doom. And I'm just thinking, bro, everything that's happening to you is the result of your actions.
This is entirely your fault.
Yeah.
What do you mean you don't want to marry me? We were childhood friends.
Yeah.
So fucking funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of the childhood friends trope, I think that's such an anime thing to add into the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, a little bit. I do again, going back to the sort of myth making of Helm Hammerhand. It is also just great. First thing you see with him is just him one-hitting a dude to death. Also a very anime thing. He just straight up one-punched man to his ass.
If my memory serves incorrectly, wasn't he like, hey, get up? Get up! I only punched you once.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's just
he was in disbelief that he'd killed him with one hit.
I didn't kill him. I hit him once. He
I
simply
barely touched the motherfucker.
he's simply built different. He has
Yeah.
he has that Mike Tyson punch where you could die if you get hit.
I mean, that's why his nickname is Hammerhand.
Yeah,
Uh,
100%.
it's because of that time killing a dude with his fist.
Yeah,
Shit, I'm trying to get some hammer hand.
okay, buddy. I wouldn't advise that personally. Sounds like it'd be very
built different.
painful.
Me personally, wouldn't let that happen.
Hell, Hammerhand, if he was on that plane, would have gone down different.
Would have gone down that way.
All right, so we brought up a couple
we would
of things.
have to add a side to the Pentagon.
The hexagon.
The
hexagon.
The hexagon. What the fuck am I talking about?
I don't know what this bit is, but it's fun.
All right, so we brought up a couple things that are specifically anime that were added into the Lord of the Rings for this film, like the childhood friend thing, Helm Hammerhand in general, in the way that he's portrayed. But I would really like to talk about the anime inspirations for the film. I think across the board, everybody who was on the project said that they took a lot from Miyazaki. And I wanted to hear if you guys noticed anything in particular from specific Miyazaki properties.
It did have a sort of almost Mononoke-esque vibe to it, particularly with just like the environments and like when they're running around on the horses. It kind of reminded me of
I
Mononoke.
definitely saw that when in the scene leading up to the Watcher in the Water, with the horse chase and the Oliphant.
Yeah,
That was very much the boar chase from the opening of Mononoke.
yeah, 100%. We got the creatures in there.
I noticed when I was reading about the movie earlier today, I noticed that the directors and the staff in general listed 2 filmmakers specifically as a reference. One of them being Miyazaki, as you mentioned, but the other big influence they cited was Akira Kurosawa.
Right. Yeah.
I see the Kurosawa influence more than anything. That might just be because of I saw Seven Samurai a week ago.
Yeah.
So maybe it's fresh in my mind.
Very fair.
Yeah.
So, but especially with how they block the action, well, quote unquote block the action sequences, really very much so reminded me of how Kurosawa would block his action sequences.
I had the same note on it, actually, that the Kurosawa was definitely an inspiration for blocking where all of the characters were. I actually see it more from Kurosawa's Rashomon than I do from Seven Samurai. But
Seven Samurai is just the one I've seen the most recently. I also obviously see Rashomon. I see Yojimbo in there. Actually, I see a lot of Yojimbo in there now that I think about it. But still, yeah.
Yeah. But as far as like what inspiration I saw from Miyazaki, I personally saw Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind a lot, considering Hera being the main character. The striking scene for me is the one where she's climbing up the cliff to see the great eagle to plead for its help. Is very similar from the first moment that you see Nausicaa, where she's climbing up the side of that vessel to open it up. In the beginning of the film. It's very similar in both composition, but also length of time that it happens. So it was a very clear inspiration, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
I see that.
You did bring up earlier, Tanner, how this is fairly long, and it is definitely long for an animated movie. It is funny how, even though it feels long, it is far shorter than the Peter Jackson movies, but it's the longest of the animated Lord of the Rings movies by, well, actually, it's the longest one, but I think the Bakshi one is not that much shorter. That one's like just a little over 2 hours.
I think it's hard for them to do a Lord of the Rings movie and it be shorter than 2 hours, to be honest.
Yeah.
A lot of what makes something a Lord of the Rings film is the length.
Yeah, and that's sort of, playing into Tolkien's thing of using an entire page to describe the environment to really get you in the headspace of your environment. And like the movies all
Absolutely.
kind of specialize in really painting a very pretty picture of the world.
The gratuitous establishing shots, yeah.
Yeah, and they had to do a little bit of that here for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one shot that like the one sequence that's really coming to my mind is when she's like climbing up the snowy mountain to get to the eagle. Like that is a relatively like projected sequence, and like it has purpose, but I feel like it also a lot of it just plays into building that world.
Yeah, for sure. What comes to my mind when we talk about the setting of the environment and like adding shots to paint a picture for the audience, is stuff like showing all of the buildings and like Helm's Deep itself, in like carved into the mountainside, and showing Isengard from a distance as they're escaping from it. Those things where they really hover on these are the iconic spaces from Lord of the Rings that we're reusing. And I think that's okay because they do fit relatively into the plot well. Like those places are always going to be important. Edoras, Helm's Deep, Isengard are always going to be important when you're talking about somewhere set in Middle Earth. But it is it really shows how much attention to detail they held with those places, that like every establishing shot looks like the Peter Jackson films, and then every individual close-up shot gives you even more of a feeling of that place being lived in.
Yeah. Something you mentioned earlier, the younger brother and his horse, particularly that scene where they're running off and the horse is exhausted and she has to stop.
Right.
Like that, I think, is one of my favorite moments in the movie where he gets off and he's not gonna run away. He's standing by his horse, pulling that arrow. Like that I think is one of my favorite moments in the movie. A real MVP, absolute king, right there.
Yeah, that felt very much so Tolkien, and it was one of the most touching and endearing moments of the film.
Yeah, and then you think they just are gonna kill him off screen. They kind of do, but they bring him back to kill him. That was something I noticed too, was like it felt like a lot of the like blood punches were pulled to get a PG-13, which like in live action I don't normally notice as much. I feel like I notice it more with anime for whatever reason. I guess just because anime tends to have very gratuitous blood. I think the
directorial choices for it. Yeah, the directorial choices to avoid showing any at all are different with animation than they are with live action. With live action, you just don't use the special effects as much.
Yeah.
Whereas with animation, in order for it to look like you did anything, you have to animate it pretty accurately.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the impact of the shot just doesn't work.
Yeah.
There's not as many shortcuts for that kind of thing. So I do think like the pulling away from it, though, seeing the other characters' emotions and reactions to the events that occur kind of thing, they give away the like, oh hey, we had to not show that for the rating.
Right, yeah. And like they do that black blood trick a couple times, like particularly when the Hammerhand Wraith is fighting the big orc guy. That fucking tears off his horn. We got some black blood in there. Tanner, what's up? Great.
I like the movie.
Good stuff.
I like
Would
when
you
the
have
old
liked
man
it-
takes his shirt off and he has like a fucking 17 pack abs.
Would you like it more if it had a higher budget?
I mean that's a difficult question to answer. Obviously, filmmakers, most filmmakers in the world would obviously like more resources, more time, more money to achieve their directorial vision. But I am also a big believer in that one of the greatest drivers of creativity and innovation is limitation. Would it maybe have been better? I don't know. It would depend on how they spent the money. I don't know how much you can really
Extrapolate from what we do now.
Yeah, it already feels like the best version of this movie. I can tell that this was an incredibly limited budget, but I can tell that the creatives at hand accomplish as much as they could with that limited budget. I also
agree.
think it's very obvious that Lionsgate rushed this out the door, as I think they might have been at risk at losing the IP. It's a fine enough movie. Lionsgate doesn't want to lose. This isn't Lionsgate.
It's
I'm
Warner
sorry.
Brothers.
New Line Cinema, Regency Films, New Line Cinema, which is they work with Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
Whoever owns the rights to the Lord of the Rings, at least those books for film adaptations, clearly don't want to lose it. Considering Lord of the Rings is a valuable IP, considering Amazon is spending billions of dollars on a TV show, I don't know a single person who has watched it, but
False. Austin watches that.
Yeah.
he watches Rings of Power?
I'm pretty sure he was talking about it a couple of years ago.
I'm going to confront him at work with this. I'm the press confronting Nixon about Watergate. I'm going to treat it with the same severity.
I mean,
I have reports saying that you're watching Rings of Power, confirm or deny.
Rings of Power in general has that Amazon money. You know, they're able to spend about as much per episode as the entire budget for the Peter Jackson trilogy.
And boy, can you not tell?
Nope.
Because it looks like shit.
And I think that leads excellently into your point, you know, about like it's where the creatives are spending that money. And I think you're absolutely right. This was done with as much love and care as they could, with all the resources that they could pull into it. I do think that it's atrocious that they did not give them a larger budget for a 2.5-hour film that is animated.
Yeah, animation ain't cheap. And they skimped corners where they can. A lot of this is in with the amount of CGI they use.
Yes.
Clearly using that CGI is cheaper than a lot of the hand-drawn, or at least traditional 2D stuff. So,
right.
Yeah, and going on the skimping part of it, like I feel like they skimped on the animation a little bit, but also just on the marketing in general.
yeah, did they ever make a second trailer? I only ever saw the one.
Probably not.
There were two trailers, but they were mostly shared footage between the two.
Yeah, and like this is, you know, the sort of thing I come to expect for anime releases in the States. It's, you know, slightly above your standard anime release. You know, I'm used to the days when it would be like, you want to watch this anime movie? You got 2 nights to do it. Good luck. And you know,
That's
this
still
right.
the case a lot of the time.
that's still the case for a fair amount of them. I feel like they're getting better now because they've realized. Oh,
You're right.
Sometimes these can make
It is
money,
improving.
but
There were 3 days I was able to watch Look Back instead of 2.
yeah, there we go.
Wow.
Uh,
I don't know. I think the success of the Demon Slayer film,
Yeah,
both
that-
in the States and internationally,
there was
like box office wise was
there
was
was
a big change.
There was a brief moment where Demon Slayer Mugen Train was the #1 movie in America, and I think that is very funny.
Yeah,
Isn't one of
I mean,
the
it
Dragon
was
Ball
the #1
movies-
movie.
Wasn't one of the
It was
Dragon
the
Ball
#1
movies
movie,
the number
yeah.
1 movie for like a day?
The Broly one, I think, Super Broly,
Yeah, I think that one might have finished first in its weekend.
Or maybe it was superhero. I don't know.
I don't.
I've
yeah.
only been tangentially involved with Dragon Ball Super and
Yeah.
the movies associated.
Yeah, I think it was probably Broly. I don't think they marketed superhero a whole lot.
Right.
But yeah.
Damn.
All things
Dragon Ball Superhero made 21 million its opening weekend, and then under 5 million in its second. Woo!
Incredible.
That's a drop.
But
Yeah.
overall,
I do think anime films are increasing in popularity, though.
yeah. All things considered, I think they are getting better about going, hey, these things can make money if we market them a little bit and put them in theaters for more than 2 or 3 days. You know, people more and more are in love with anime. You know, our generation, a lot of our generation grew up with it, and like now it's a lot more accessible to young people who want to just, you know, watch the new show out in Japan right now instead of buying a bootleg VHS behind a Wendy's for $30.
Yeah.
And so I think
I do it behind a Taco Bell like a real man.
Yeah, there you go. But, you know, I think that's getting better, and all things considered, I think they did a slightly better job at marketing this than they probably would have if it came out like 10 years ago. But I still, you know, they could have done better for sure. Well, with all that said, let's get into our final thoughts on this picture. Tanner, we'll start with you.
Movie good. In all seriousness, I dug it. It's good. Long. Remember Lord of the Rings hammer? It was a bit annoying when they really hit it. It's a good movie. I wish it did better. But you know, hopefully that means I hope the relative lack of success for this movie doesn't discourage New Line Cinema from continuing to do new and interesting things with Lord of the Rings.
Fair enough. Good stuff. Emilia, final thoughts.
I had a really fun time with the movie, and I am probably going to continue to watch it again. Whenever I feel an itch to watch Lord of the Rings, I'm probably going to turn to this instead of watching the whole Peter Jackson trilogy again every once in a while, because it's shorter and more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
It, unlike Tanner's black bean burger analogy, this is kind of like my real burger meets like French fries kind of thing. You know, it's like
Hell yeah.
for me, this is kind of like my niche.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed it and I appreciate it for what it is. Could it have done better? Yeah, but it was what I wanted. Maybe not what I expected, but what I wanted. And I actually I have my own YouTube channel. Probably shamelessly plug it here for a second, but I'm
for sure.
putting a video out soon, talking specifically about Tolkien's influence on anime, and I go a little bit more into detail about what the film took from the original trilogy that Peter Jackson directed, but also Tolkien's writing specifically. And I'm really grateful to have this to talk about, because it's something I never expected. Like a Lord of the Rings anime was something I never expected to see in my lifetime.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, good stuff. My final thoughts, you know, just kind of echoing you guys. Had a good time with it. You know, there's definitely some like studio stuff in it, and it mostly doesn't bother me. Again, the Saruman thing is the only thing that really bothered me, but overall, had a good time with it. If you enjoy fantasy anime and have some passing familiarity with Tolkien, you might have a good time with it. If you're a big fan of Tolkien, you may love it. You may think it massacred your boy. I don't know. It seems to have differing reactions from different people. My fiance, who was a big Tolkien fan, she was really excited for the movie, and she overall enjoyed it. She it didn't quite meet her expectations, so it's just kind of a mixed bag amongst different people. But whenever it hits streaming, I wouldn't recommend renting it right now. It's like a $10 rental, but eventually it's gonna hit Max. So if you have Max, just watch it when it's on Max. So that,
it should eventually come on Max. Who the fuck knows with what streaming does nowadays?
yeah, basically. But anyway, yeah, with all that said, that's gonna do it for this episode of Bomb Squad Matinee. Thank you all for tuning in. Emilia, thank you for joining the podcast. You mentioned your YouTube channel. Do you want to plug that and any other stuff real quick?
Yeah. So if you are watching this because you like anime and not because you like Lord of the Rings, I have a couple of other videos on that channel, Emilia.tv, where I've already talked about some anime that's been pretty impactful on me and my life. So go give those a watch if you are curious.
Hell yeah.
And thank you guys for having me again on the show. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure to have you. A pleasure to be on a recording with you, because I wasn't on the Ant-Man one.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for coming on, and thank you, the viewer, for tuning in. If you're listening on the audio platforms, give us a review or a thumbs up or some kind of just tell us how we're doing. We appreciate any kind of feedback. And if you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching on YouTube. Leave a comment below. Let us know, what did you think of Lord of the Rings: The War of the Rohirrim? Is it your favorite animated Lord of the Rings movie? Are you gonna continue to work it into your Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings marathons? And finally, will Helm Hammerhand still stand? Comment below and let us know. And while you're down,
Many people are asking this.
it's an important question. And while we're down there, hit the like button if you like the video, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and hit the bell icon to get updates when we make new stuff. And if you want to support us further, please consider donating to our Patreon. We got 2 tiers. $5 tier gets you access to some commentary tracks. We just released one on 12 Angry Men. At some point, we're gonna record a Godzilla one. We've been saying this. It's been a busy month. We just made a movie. We're making another movie. I'm editing a bunch of other movies. We got a lot going on right now. But
Sorry.
we'll get that Godzilla commentary track out at some point. So you get that if you donate to the $5 tier, and if you donate to the $10 tier. Not only do you get those commentary tracks, but you also get a shout out at the end of these episodes. So, many thanks to our $10 sponsor, Tanya Craft. We appreciate your continued patronage of the channel. And if you too...
No relation, I swear.
Yeah, just a totally different craft. And if you too would like to get a shout out at the end of the episode, just donate to our $10 tier. We really appreciate it, and we will immortalize your name in podcast. Be sure to tune in next week when we talk about Sean Baker's latest picture, Nora. It's going to be a good time. It's a pretty good movie, and I'm sure we're going to have some interesting things to say about it. So tune in for that. And thank you once again for tuning into this episode. And remember, Rohan still stands. Helm Hammerhand still stands. Farewell.
Bye.
If you should ever be in need of assistance, my lord.
I slid my ticket across the table and I said, "Sorry guys, I gotta see about a girl."